Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. My name is John Grant. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here with Goliath Technologies. Today, I'm joined by George Spears, who is a longtime Citrix expert, a Citrix CTP, and an end user computing consultant over in the United Kingdom. And so I'm very excited to be joined by George today. And in particular, the topic of our discussion is centered around IT operations and IT operations teams supporting Citrix environments. The title is actually Technology is the Answer. And the reason it is that is because the focus of the discussion with George today is around how IT operations teams, are utilizing software and other technologies to augment and fill gaps that traditionally had only been filled by manpower or by humanware, if you'd like to call it that. And so I'm very excited to have George and his considerable experience on here with us today. And so for today, the format is predominantly going to be question and answer. I'm going to ask George a series of questions around this area so that he can talk about his experience and how he sees IT operations teams addressing this challenge. He's going to talk about the challenge at first and then explain how organizations are addressing this by utilizing software and how perhaps it is the answer given the state of affairs with IT operations today. So George, welcome. We'll get right to the first question, which is, of course, what are the factors that make it so difficult for a Citrix administrator?
Yes, so complexity is one of the main reasons why it's difficult to manage and support a Citrix environment, but also why there is user experience issues. So a typical Citrix deployment will be reliant not just on the core Citrix infrastructure, like your delivery controllers and storefront servers, but also a lot of supporting services like Active Directory, DNS. The network is a critical piece, obviously, and the storage layer and the compute and so on. So there's so many different pieces that make up the Citrix environment, and each piece has to work well at all times. If one part goes wrong, like maybe storage starts to incur latency and all your desktops are hosted on that storage array, then there's going to be user experience problems. So it's definitely complex and difficult to support, but hopefully with the right tools and the right teams that are looking at this stuff 24/7, that risk can be reduced. Also, typically, there's legacy monitoring tools that don't understand how to interpret and monitor Citrix effectively. So free tools are also in use, like Citrix Director, which really only touches the surface when it comes to Citrix deployment. So it can't get deep into the fine detail, which typically is what IT need when it comes to troubleshooting issues and solving that root cause also. Because typically in environments that I've worked with, from my experience, there's been free tools that being used, and there's also been monitoring solutions which aren't bespoke to Citrix environments. It's made it more difficult for the help desk to solve issues. The help desk typically have not understood how Citrix environments work. When a ticket comes in, they may just ask the user to log off, log back in again, or they may restart their session, etc. And all that does is it solves the ticket, but it doesn't solve the actual root problem if there is a root problem there. So a user will end up going away, they're working for now, they'll call back the next day with potentially the same problem, and then IT or the help desk in particular will repeat the same step. And it's really just a band-aid. It's not a permanent fix. So there's never a root cause found in that respect. And users get frustrated as a result of that. And typically, if there is issues that happen, because IT don't understand that, then they'll escalate to the Citrix engineer, who then has their hands tied, because they're dealing with the sort of firefighting rather than being able to do what they're best at doing, which is keeping the environment upgraded and providing that value to improve the service.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned a couple of things. By the way, George, while you were speaking, I pulled up a slide that represents, I believe, what you had just been talking about, which was initially that there's inherent complexity. Um, in Citrix environments, there's a lot of infrastructure pieces and variables that can all contribute to the user experience. They are represented on the screen from left to right, left being users, right being the infrastructure. So, I think this does a kind of good visual job of explaining what you just described, which is that any one of these things has an issue, and it's going to impact user experience. And so being bespoke, I love the use of that term in this setting. Being bespoke and purpose built is very meaningful to be able to take all these into account. You mentioned the Citrix tools, and that you need to monitor more than the Citrix stack. Are you saying, so what you're essentially saying is that you need to be able to bring it back to this, take all of these things into account? And with your monitoring, you can't just look at Citrix, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you got to look at things like the profile server, which is a critical piece. And, if that goes wrong, you're going to have all sorts of issues. You got to look at things like the SQL side. Is there any issues with that? Active Directory, and obviously, as I mentioned, the storage and network. And that's just a couple of things. There's much more. You've got your Citrix layer, the Citrix gateway layer as well. So obviously with COVID too, a lot of people are working from home. They're now using maybe VPN, which is powered by the Citrix ADC, or they're using ICA gateways, which is quite popular in a Citrix environment. So they need to be monitored as well. Those virtual VPX appliances, or if they're physical. Because again, they make up the entire piece of the Citrix infrastructure, and if there is an issue with one of those, then user experience is going to be impacted in some form.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you ask most CIOs or IT directors, they would typically say that they want their engineering teams focused on designing new solutions or architectures, on innovating new solutions, coming up with new projects, things of that nature. Based on what you're saying, now you work with Citrix administrators and engineers every day, George. How much of their time do you see not spent doing things like that, but instead getting pulled into operational firefighting exercises like the ones you just described?
I think it could be at least 50%, sometimes higher, but
Yeah.
they definitely receive escalated tickets, which are basic issues. They could just turn out to be something real simple, and as I say, it's not a good use of the Citrix expert's time. So with Citrix environments, if you're not running Citrix Cloud, for example, and many healthcare customers, certainly my side of the pond, do not have Citrix Cloud, and Citrix release a lot of new updates quite frequently. So you've got to make sure that you're updating your environment all the time. All the different patching that goes on. There is a lot of maintenance and upkeep. So yeah, the Citrix admin has to focus on things like that rather than troubleshooting the simple issues that really should be sorted out by the help desk as well.
What would be the right data then? And by the right data, I mean the right data that would empower IT help desk, and IT engineering so that they would be able to overcome the challenges you just described and provide end users with a positive end user experience.
Yes, of course, from the bottom, you've got typical infrastructure data, like RAM consumption, CPU consumption, storage response times, and then further up the stack and more into the Citrix piece, you have things like user experience metrics, things like log-on time, how long does it take for a user log-on to complete, and all the different steps that make up the log-on, like script processing, group policy processing, HDX connection times, and then you have things like ICA latency, so your round trip time values. And with remote working, there's certainly more variables. So you have to look at things like WAN latency, data center latency, trying to prove that if a user calls in and says, my Citrix is slow, is that inside your remit, i.e. is it in the data center? Is it on the VDAs? Is it at the NetScaler gateway level? Or is it the user side, which in most cases it is, because right, one user is calling up, they're saying Citrix is slow. My internet is absolutely fine, but then nobody else is calling, and we have like 1,000 users connected. So if your internet is fine, yeah, it doesn't really add up. It's most likely the user's endpoint or their connection, but how do you prove that without, bespoke monitoring solutions? So I say that all that is the right data. And then just moving on to your question, historical, keeping this thing on record. So you got to have good historical retention so that a Citrix engineer that comes in and deals with those escalations that we talked about, they don't have to sort of reinvent the wheel and collect data from the beginning. They already have everything there. So you could imagine how much time that and effort that will save in the long run.
Right.
And obviously data, it'll prove where a problem is. And you can also use data to prove that you've solved issues and root cause, and you can show that to management as well.
Right.
And then you have obviously the embedded intelligence, which would be the third part. I know that really helps the help desk be able to be more effective when they're troubleshooting Citrix issues. Embedded intelligence, it basically takes all that data that it's collecting every second, and it almost gives you the answer to a problem. So you don't have to spend hours and hours looking at different servers, looking at group policy to understand why it's slow. You just open up, the console of your monitoring solution, and it feeds that data in to nice graphs, easy to read graphs, and so on, so that you can really pinpoint down to the root cause much quicker.
In your experience, George, now, of course, I represent Goliath Technologies in today's session, right? Which offers software that does the things that you have been talking about. When you're talking about showing user experience at a detailed level and the supporting infrastructure pieces in one view, or tracking data historically and in real time so that both help desk and the engineering teams can use it. And by doing things like blending that with embedded intelligence so that IT can quickly and easily troubleshoot root cause and know if there's an issue and understand what they're looking at so that they can quickly respond to end users. All those sorts of things. Have you seen real world impacts of the kinds of things you're talking about in the marketplace? And have you seen the inverse effect take place from customers or from organizations that have had the good fortune of having access to consoles and data like you would see from Goliath? Has that helped? Have you seen a reduction in tickets and a different kind of IT outcome? Or is this something that you're simply arguing for and believe could have an impact?
Yeah, so yeah, as you say, if Citrix Engineering receive, a problem investigation and with the right data, they can apply the root cause, and equally they can then show that root cause has been applied and that problem no longer is occurring. So yeah,
Right.
ticket numbers definitely drive down. If tickets come in, they're resolved quicker, so that makes the end user, much happier. They're confident that the help desk know what they're, doing, and they understand that the problems and they are effective at troubleshooting issues. So from a user experience perspective, that's also good. And help desks don't waste time just restarting sessions and frustrating users in the long run. They also get confidence out of this. So when they understand Citrix better, they understand the data, then they're more confident at handling these calls. So they start to feel more empowered and being able to support a Citrix environment. And also from a escalation perspective, right? Not every Citrix issue, as it's called, is an actual Citrix problem. Most times it's actually not Citrix. You've probably heard that before. So, Citrix, a user calls in, I have really long logon times, or I can't log in at all. It may be because the profile server is down, and that may not be the right escalation to the Citrix engineering team. So again, with the right data coming from a bespoke monitoring solution, help desk can say, right, we got to escalate this, but not to Citrix engineering. Let's escalate it to the file services team or the hosting team instead. One, that drives down the resolution time because it's been escalated correctly. And two, it doesn't waste anybody's time, because if it was escalated incorrectly to the Citrix engineer, they would then have to spend the time to understand the problem, troubleshoot it, figure out that it's not Citrix, it's actually a file server problem, and then escalate it or pass that call to the different department. So they've just wasted maybe 1 hour, 2 hours, probably more, when it wasn't even a Citrix issue. So you can imagine how data and obviously the right monitoring software can, it has a lot of different advantages.
Earlier you mentioned the importance of liberating the data, but then you also talked about the complexity of Citrix environments and the shortage of Citrix expertise, and that software that does liberate the appropriate data also needs to be combined with embedded intelligence. Now, that can mean different things to different people, but from our side of things, from my side of things at Goliath, one of the things we've always embodied and been driving into our software and our technology as a core philosophy and as a core tenet of the software is not just the importance of deep metrics and liberating the right metrics that give IT the right answers, but also the importance of providing it in such a way that it is streamlined, easy to use for help desk to have analysis views that they can actually understand and leverage and impact their day-to-day. And that does not require Citrix expertise because it includes things like embedded definitions or different troubleshooting tips, best practice troubleshooting threshold lines, so they know when there's actually a problem without understanding Citrix, as well as an actual embedded knowledge base, Citrix troubleshooting knowledge base, so that folks can increase their education and knowledge level in this area. Okay, the idea being not just to liberate the data, like you said, but actually enable IT operations to support Citrix and turn it from being a black box, call it, into something that with the use of software, they can actually effectively support, and in a way that doesn't cause backlogs, cause user experience issues to persist, or ultimately impact user satisfaction with IT and with the service in general, and in a way that allows them to increase their knowledge level as time goes on. From your experience, you've worked with Goliath customers, you've recommended Goliath plenty of times. What kind of impact have you seen this kind of software had actually in the marketplace and IT operations, and more importantly, ultimately, on end user satisfaction? What would you say that impact is?
Yeah, so reduction is I think it's inevitable. You have bespoke monitoring solutions. So, I mean, I've seen typical reduction. I don't know from a percentage perspective. That's not really my game. I'm a techie, so the numbers don't mean as much to me. But there's certainly a reduction. I see the reduction in escalations, which is one of the main things that I would see, because typically going from having a call escalated perhaps every couple of days or every day versus what it used to be, which was multiple calls per day escalated, and you're always getting IAM via Teams. So I've seen that. I've seen that reduction quite a bit. So I mean that's great, because again, as I mentioned before, that then allows you to have the time to not firefight. And no Citrix expert wants to firefight, but it is so common in Citrix environments because of the lack of expertise and the lack of understanding of Citrix environments. But one of those solutions that are in place, and when they're reducing those tickets, that gives you more time to do what you're really good at, and it improves job satisfaction also for the Citrix expert.
Well, George, that is our time for today. I wish we could keep going further, keep going on, but we filled up our time for today. I want to thank you for putting the time aside today and for answering a couple of questions around your experience and what IT operations is faced with when it comes to supporting Citrix. And I want to thank you again for all of your insight. For everyone that's viewing, thank you for attending. If you're interested in seeing more around the Goliath solution, and seeing perhaps a demonstration of it or a free trial of the software, please feel free to reach out via our website. You could fill out a form and we'd be happy to give you a personalized demonstration of the software, Goliath Performance Monitor, or on providing you with a link for the free trial where you can test it in your own environment. We also do things like offer free health check assessments, as well as offer a free end user experience scorecard for you as well. So should you have any interest in those things, please let me know, or fill out, or again, apply through our website, and we'd be happy to get in touch with you so that you can take a look and evaluate whether Goliath would be an interesting or good fit for you in terms of improving how IT supports and troubleshoots Citrix user experience. Okay, well, that's all for me. Thank you, everyone. John Grant signing off.